Welcome. My name is Janine Barchas. I'm a professor in the English department at the University of Texas at Austin. And today I am introducing you to What Jane Saw. So I'm going to share my screen and introduce you to this website here that will hopefully take you to 1796, which you can do on your own, and 1893, which is where I'm going to take you today. And it's called What Jane Saw because Jane Austen, during her lifetime, visited these two blockbuster exhibitions. The one on the left is the Shakespeare Gallery, started by entrepreneur John Boydell in London. And it was the first museum dedicated to William Shakespeare. And so if you are reading William Shakespeare, you might want to look at what his reputation generated 200 years ago and how there was a museum dedicated to the Bard and how people walked through a museum with life-sized paintings of the highest highs and the lowest lows from his famous plays. It's like binge watching Shakespeare for those in the 1790s, all the way to about 1804, when the museum went bust and was a financial disaster and the paintings were dispersed. And so many of the paintings don't exist anymore. And myself and my team here at LAITS, the Liberal Arts Technology Services at the University of Texas, recreated it. But I'm going to take you to 1813, where we are entering a gallery that is, and I'm going to show you, you know how to navigate a website, but this is the floor plan. And so we can go to and visit any view. And if you've ever been to a museum, you know what to do. Read the labels, hang out in front of a painting. This was the very first one-man show in all of Europe. It was a show dedicated to the reputation of Sir Joshua Reynolds, and it was held by the British Institution, the first institution, the first club for artists devoted to Britishness. And there were so many paintings and artists celebrated from the continent. You've heard of Rembrandt, of Rubens, Caravaggio. They were coming to England. But suddenly there was an English painter to celebrate. He had died in 1792, and he had been a celebrity painter. He had painted everyone who was anyone over the course of his career. He had died in 1792, and he had become, because of painting these famous celebrities, the Anne Leibovitch of his day. She's a famous portraitist with a camera today. And so the paintings were borrowed from the current owners. They were owned by Lady such and such and Lady so and so. And in fact, in the catalog for a shilling that visitors to this museum, or rather it was an institute that during the season in London had 3 months where you could pay a shilling. You get a catalog like this and you could peruse the walls. And in fact, as you can see, the catalog, which survives in a museum, and there's a facsimile here, you can click on any of these and go to that particular painting, is a catalog that was, that survives from 1813. So this is the actual catalog that Jane Austen would have held in her hand. And we're using it online to do the same thing, to tour the exhibit. This is King Lear, and it's a bit of a joke, and I'm going to give you the sort of, or it's not a joke, it's actually kind of sad, because this is the era of the Regency. And I'll show you in a moment the king that had gone mad. You've heard of Mad King George. If you've seen Hamilton, you will know just who I'm talking about. The one who sings "You'll Be Back." Now, King George was declared mad. His son was the regent. He was reigning in his stead starting in 1810. And that means that even the play King Lear, which you know from Shakespeare, about a mad king, was not being performed on the stage. It was deemed inappropriate, but there it hangs in the corner anyway. Whereas the king, let's start with him because he is, oh, it turned the wrong way. Here is our first wall. So when visitors went up to the second floor, so the first floor was in this new museum dedicated to Shakespeare. I'm sorry, dedicated to this time the British Museum. It's the same building, but first it was the Shakespeare Museum, and then when that went bust, the British Institute opened it. On the first floor, there was, during the time of the museum, a shop, as you would in any museum now. That's where the revenue came from, selling books, selling prints. And the British Institute used the whole thing as an exhibition space and a space for artists to paint. So they would bring their easel in and paint. Okay, but when you were a visitor, you went up these stairs. So these represent the stairs. You went up from the first floor and you faced that first wall in the catalog. And therefore, you faced this wall, which we have rehung based upon that first section of the catalog. You're in the North Room, and here are the 5 portraits. So I want you to understand how this was curated. These are the portraits. These are the dimensions. And these are the people who owned them at the time. So the owners, it was exciting to see someone's famous whose picture, the Duke of Dorset had that picture. So you got to see Boy with Cabbage Nets that was owned by the Duke. But let's go. The first number 1 is, of course, His Majesty, because it's the king. Propriety demands that he be acknowledged as number 1. And you can read about him and Queen Charlotte here. And this was a portrait that Sir Joshua Reynolds painted when the king was relatively young, early in his youth or early in his reign. But no one comes to do a blockbuster exhibition of a great painter, a painting that is decades old of a king who's now gone mad and old. But propriety demands he be number 1. But everyone came to see number 2. Everyone came to see this. The most talked about painting in the entire 18th century is the portrait of Sarah Siddons, the doyen of tragedy on the stage, the greatest tragic actress, also associated mostly with Shakespearean tragedy, and Lady Macbeth, for example, was her most famous role. This is the Meryl Streep of the age. And here she is in all her glory, and it is truly the most praised painting that Reynolds ever did, and by chance, probably the most praised painting of the entire 18th century. It's a portrait. She's the sitter. This time she's sitting, although sitters in portraits don't need to be sitting. They can be standing. That's just what we call them. But she is, of course, sitting in this throne. I'll come back to that, but I just want to show you that the portrait was engraved and used as a kind of celebrity pinup during this time and in the decades following. This was such a famous painting that not only were oil painting copies made in Reynolds' studio, and so one of them hangs in the Huntington Library in California right now in that museum, and another one hangs in England in another museum. Notice how monochromatic it is, how very little color there is. The only color in this painting is the kind of blush of the cheeks of the famous Sarah Siddons herself. She is the color in this world, and behind her are the ghosts of sort of tragedy and pathos. And you can see that she's an actress and she's posing. Now, if we look at her on the wall in the context of this exhibition, you can see that she's kind of the reigning queen of this exhibit. And in fact, she was so famous, and Reynolds was still relatively young when he did this, or early in his career, and she and hers, that it's kind of like a pact. He asked her as a celebrity on the rise, would she pose for him? And she agreed, and it was mutually advantageous for this painting to then hang in his studio as advertisement for what he could do, and advertisement for her. So think of it as also as product placement, the Instagram equivalent of, oh, if Sarah Siddons had only had a Twitter feed, my God. But I digress. So we come to this here's a secret button you might want to try to compare the different views of the Shakespeare Gallery and its crowded hang and the slightly less crowded hang of the British institution. Anyway, we come up the stairs and we see these portraits hanging here, or so did I and my team think they must have hung. And the reason for that is not only is he number one, and he's the king, and propriety demands that he be hung a little bit higher than this reigning queen of the stage, but across the gallery is, let's go back to the floor plan. So if we look through and see from the kind of eye view of that portrait of King George, this is Queen Charlotte. This is his queen. And in fact, we'll go to the other side. You can see that there are 3 rooms here. And if the queen hangs here, well, we'll go in a moment, and the king hangs here, they have been hung as propriety demands in the way that they would host a dinner party, with the king on one side and the queen on the other, and all of their guests placed according to their standing in the peerage, in the kind of social hierarchy of England, aligned in different places. So here's the queen, and the queen hangs opposite, and Queen Charlotte, who had, oh my gosh, how many children did she have? Like 9 or 10, maybe more. A lot of children. So they have a lot of princes and princesses as well, who hang in different locations on the side walls, but she is flanked on both sides by admirals of the Navy, because this is 1813 and we're at war with France here in England in 1813. And we're counting on the Navy, the wooden walls of the Navy, to protect England at this time. And so it makes sense that the curators would take the 2 pictures of Navy admirals and kind of have them be chaperoning the Queen or be on, either side of her. Interestingly, this admiral, Lord Rodney, had been painted by Sir Joshua Reynolds, the great painter, twice. And here he hangs as a younger man. And so imagine if you are a viewer of this gallery and can see, by looking at this corner, a man age, like time-lapse photography now, by looking at those 2 portraits. So the curators of this exhibition had really thought about propriety, about what would generate the most talk in the gallery, because let me tell you, this was not the hushed museum gallery experience of today. These were people, 800, 1,000 during a good day of the season in 1813. It hung between May and through August, so about 4 months, where people milled and talked. And there is so much rumor here. This, for example, is the Prince Regent, who is reigning now, a portrait when he was younger. And we couldn't actually find the rights to hang the painting, although it's in the royal collection. So eventually we will. But we have this colorful engraving and the black and white version. And yes, the prince was a bit of a horse's ass. And you can read about him here, but you'll find out that maybe Reynolds had a point when he painted that. But the prince liked it. But next to him, the curators have hung some children, and don't they look adorable? Some cherubs over here, the Infant Academy, a friend of his, some more children here. But these children were rumored to be the prince's children, illegitimate children, children that actually belonged, and that's how clever they were. 2 rooms over hangs the mother of those children. Yep, Lady Melbourne, a friend of Lord Byron's. You might want to Google him. And a friend of the Prince Regent's, a close confidant, so close that it was rumored, and who knows whether it's true or not. There are always rumors about royals, and that's no different today than then. Rumored not to be Lord Melbourne's children, but actually the Prince Regent's children. He wasn't the regent then. And this is her with her son, the eldest of maybe Lord Melbourne. His name is Peniston. Now, I urge you never to name your children Peniston. It's just not an appropriate name anymore, but apparently it was a family name in the Melbourne family. Deeply unfortunate. But there she is, this socialite and high-placed woman, and she was a celebrity in her day. And like I said, if she too had an Instagram account or a Twitter feed, yeah, you'd be watching that feed. So there are portraits here of gentlemen and ladies, and all of them have some association with each other. It was a very small group of elite individuals. There are lots of celebrities where we would recognize today the kind of celebrity status of a famous actor, not just Sarah Siddons on one wall, but this is probably the most famous male actor of the 18th century, David Garrick. And here he is between tragedy and comedy. He also built his career on sort of the reputation of Shakespeare, and kind of dragged on the coattails of Shakespeare's fame during his career, or hung on to those coattails. But this here is a very famous picture that circulated again as an engraving, as a celebrity pinup. This is the birth of celebrity culture in Jane Austen's time. And this is the genesis of the kind of interest in celebrities that we have today. I can show you just, who else can I show you that would be, tantalizing to see? Religious pictures, pictures of people who like to play dress up with their friends. So there are lots of costumes here as well of famous elite members of the beau ton and the high society dressing up, and well, she's quite something. But here's Emma Hamilton as a Bacchante, as a woman worshiping the god Bacchus freely. And Emma Hamilton, along with Lord Nelson, her lover, who was actually married, she was married. This was scandal. Hamilton and Nelson together were the celebrity couple that Brangelina ain't got nothing on them. This is the Kardashians are but a shadow of the celebrity that these two people had. And sadly, by the time 1813 has rolled around, you can read about sort of Emma Hamilton's career and celebrity here. By the time that this is shown in 1813, Emma Hamilton had fallen from grace. Nelson had died in a battle, and she had grown poorer and poorer, and she was in debtor's prison only a few blocks away during this show, and where she was languishing and in apartments within a certain sort of radius of, it wasn't jail the way we think of it, in a single building with everyone confined to cells. So people were actually confined to house arrest essentially, but they had to live within a certain parameter around the prison for that house arrest to take place. And she was in debt for prison. And even the Prince Regent at the time, the man running England, visited her in prison. She was that famous, but she was no longer wanted by society, and she ended up moving to Calais and dying there. So imagine all the talk as you're parading through this gallery, and as a visitor, oh, I've pressed the wrong button again. Let's go to the east side. And notice how the pictures that are the nudes are hung slightly higher above eye level, and that the curators have really thought about the juxtapositions between different pictures, about the people in them and their relationships. And imagine, therefore, as you tour this gallery, the kind of celebrity culture that we've really inherited. A celebrity culture that involves so many actresses. Here's one, Mrs. Abington. Here she is in her most famous role, Miss Prue, a comedy by Congreve. And this is a pretty risque portrait, as you would imagine a celebrity, sort of a Marilyn Monroe type of that age, to be. This is a very flirtatious portrait. She is biting her thumb, or has her thumb against her mouth. "You do bite your thumb at me, sir," is one of the first lines of Romeo and Juliet. And it's meant to be sort of suggestive. She's nonchalantly sitting on a chair with, turning around. So it suggests a certain kind of intimacy and informality, as if we're seeing her in a dressing room behind the scenes while she's preparing to go on stage. And there's even a lapdog because, well, animals and objects can go where people cannot. And this little dog can sit in her lap. So it was considered a very risque portrait, although at the same time, she's playing a role of the sort of ingenue. And so this is not really her, and yet it is her. And that is the same kind of public intimacy that we have with celebrities today. So I will leave you to cruise this particular exhibition in 1813 and see famous writers, a portrait of Lawrence Sterne, famous socialites, another Lady Spencer. And yeah, I hope you enjoy yourself, and I will stop sharing the screen. And please know that, the website is free. It's been made by the University of Texas for this kind of educational use, and personally think it's also quite fun.